Saturday is a day that I remember with feelings of tension. It was also a very tiring day. Hot and humid with changes in the weather. Although I didn't sleep much, my wife was able to sleep well, and I woke up early. I went outside to my garden before breakfast and listened, but I didn't hear anything except for a bird singing. Later, the milkman came by as usual, and I went to the gate to ask him for news. He told me that troops had surrounded the Martians during the night, and that guns were expected. However, I felt relieved when I heard a train running towards Woking. The milkman said that they were trying not to kill the Martians if possible. I saw my neighbor gardening and talked with him for a while before going inside to have breakfast. The morning was quite normal. My neighbor thought that the soldiers could catch or kill the Martians that day. He said, "It's a shame that the Martians don't let us get closer to them. It would be interesting to find out how they live on their planet. We might learn something new." He came over to the fence and gave me a handful of strawberries. He loved gardening and was always sharing what he grew. He also told me that the pine woods near the Byfleet golf links were on fire. "They say," he said, "that another one of those things has fallen there, the second one. But one is already too much, isn't it? It will cost the insurance company a lot of money before everything is resolved." He laughed and seemed to be in a good mood when he said this. He told me that the woods were still burning and showed me the smoke in the distance. "The ground will be very hot for many days because of the thick layer of pine needles and turf," he said. Then he became serious when he talked about poor Ogilvy. After breakfast, I decided to take a walk towards the common instead of working. Under the railway bridge, I found a group of soldiers, who I think were sappers. They wore small round caps and dirty red jackets that were unbuttoned, revealing their blue shirts, dark trousers, and boots that came up to their calves. They told me that no one was allowed to cross the canal, and I saw one of the cardigan men guarding the bridge. I talked to the soldiers for a while and told them about the Martians that I saw the previous evening. They had not seen the Martians and did not know much about them, so they asked me many questions. They said that they were not sure who authorized the troops to move, but they thought that there was a disagreement at the Horse Guards. The sappers were more educated than the common soldiers, and they discussed the peculiar conditions of the possible fight with great insight. I described the heat ray to them, and they started to argue among themselves. One person said, "We should hide and then attack them quickly." Another person replied, "No way. The heat will burn us even under cover. We should get as close to the ground as possible and dig a trench." The third person asked, "Don't they have necks?" Then, a small man who was smoking a pipe said that he thinks they are like octopuses and they are fighting against the fishermen. The first person said, "Killing beasts like that isn't considered murder." The little dark man replied, "Why not shoot them immediately and finish them? You never know what they could do." The first person asked, "Do you have any bullets?" "There's no time. My advice is to do it quickly and do it now." They talked about it for a while. Later, I left them and went to the train station to buy as many morning newspapers as possible. I won't bore you with details about the long morning and even longer afternoon. I tried to see the common, but it wasn't possible as even the church towers in Horsell and Chobham were under military control. When I asked the soldiers, they didn't have any information, and the officers were too busy and secretive to speak with me. In the town, people felt safe with the military presence, but I heard from Marshall, the tobacconist, that his son had died on the common. The soldiers had ordered people on the outskirts of Horsell to lock up and leave their homes. I came back to have lunch around 2 o'clock feeling very tired. The day was very hot and boring. So, to feel better, I took a cold bath in the afternoon. Around 4:30 p.m., I went to the train station to get an evening newspaper. The morning newspapers didn't have accurate information about the killing of Stent, Henderson, Ogilvy, and others, but I already knew most of what was written in the newspaper. The Martians did not show themselves at all. They seemed busy in their pit, making noise and smoke. They were probably getting ready for a fight. The newspaper said that people tried to signal to the Martians, but they didn't respond. Someone told me that a man tried to signal the Martians with a flag on a long pole while hiding in a ditch, but the Martians didn't care. Seeing all the weapons and preparations excited me. I started to imagine different ways to defeat the invaders like in my childhood dreams of battles and heroes. It didn't seem like a fair fight to me. The Martians seemed very weak and helpless in their pit. At about 3 o'clock, I heard the sound of a gun being fired at regular intervals from a place called Chertsey or Addlestone. I found out that the area where the second cylinder had landed was being bombed to try to destroy it before it could open. But it wasn't until around 5 o'clock that a field gun arrived in Chobham to fight against the first group of Martians. Around 6 in the evening, my wife and I were sitting outside drinking tea and talking about the battle that was about to happen when we heard a muffled explosion from the nearby field, followed by a lot of gunfire. Then we felt the ground shake as something crashed very close to us. When I looked out, I saw the trees around the Oriental College catch on fire and the church tower next to it collapse. Even the mosque's pinnacle had disappeared, and the roof of the college looked like it had been hit by a giant gun. One of our chimneys also cracked and fell apart, scattering red pieces all over the flower bed outside my study. My wife and I were shocked, and I realized that the Martian's heat ray had probably reached the top of Mayberry Hill now that the college was gone. I grabbed my wife's arm and ran out into the road without explaining why. Then I told our servant that I would go upstairs to get the box she was asking for. "We can't stay here," I said as the gunfire started again. My wife was scared and asked, "But where can we go?" I thought for a moment and then remembered her cousins in a place called Leatherhead. I yelled over the noise. My wife looked down the hill and saw that people were coming out of their houses and looking around, surprised. She asked me how we would get to Leatherhead. I saw some soldiers on horses ride by, and some other soldiers running from house to house. The sun looked strange and red through the smoke from the burning trees. "Stay here," I told my wife. "You'll be safe. I'm going to the Spotted Dog to get the landlord's horse and cart." I knew I had to hurry because soon everyone on our side of the hill would be leaving. I ran to the Spotted Dog and found the landlord in the bar, talking to another man with his back to me. "I need to borrow your cart for £2, I told the landlord, interrupting his conversation with a stranger. "Why?" he asked. "I have to leave my home, but I'll bring it back by midnight," I replied. The landlord was confused but agreed to the deal. I hurriedly explained the urgent situation and grabbed the cart. I left it with my wife and servant, went into my house, and quickly packed some valuable items. The beech trees nearby were on fire, and the fences along the road were glowing red. While I was packing, a hussar who had dismounted came running up, warning people to leave their homes. As I was leaving my house with my belongings, I asked him, "What's the news?" I said, "We can't stay here," I told my wife as we heard gunfire in the distance. She asked where we could go, but I wasn't sure. Then I remembered her cousins in Leatherhead and shouted their name. My wife wondered how we would get there, so I decided to go to the Spotted Dog pub to borrow their horse and cart. The landlord wanted £1, but I offered him 2 and promised to bring it back by midnight. He was confused and didn't understand why I was in such a hurry. I quickly gathered some valuable items from my house while my wife and servant waited in the cart. I saw that the beech trees were on fire, and while I was packing, a hussar came to warn us to leave. I asked him for news, but he didn't say much. I then went to my neighbor's house to check if they were there, but they had already left. After getting my servant's box, I joined my wife in the cart, and we left the area. As we drove away, we saw black smoke and red fire rising from the direction we had just come from. We could hear gunfire and people running towards us. It seemed like the Martians were setting everything on fire with their heat ray. I'm not very good at driving, so I had to focus on controlling the horse. When I looked back, the smoke was hidden behind a hill. I hit the horse with the whip and let it run freely until we were far away from the chaos. We passed the doctor's cart on the road between Woking and Send.